is all yours. You can formally proceed, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you all for taking your time this evening to be a part of the presentation that we'll be doing. The focus of the talk today is really based on the experiences I've had working with and writing about what I consider to be world-class organizations that have mastered not only product excellence, which is a foundational component, I think, of all great business. Being able to deliver consistent service is also an important part of these businesses. By service, I mean get it right and make it right kinds of considerations, making sure that the processes are in place for consistent delivery. But really organizations that have entered a space beyond traditional service and really are producing emotionally engaging experiences on behalf of those they serve, both inside the organization and outside the organization. So my time today is going to be talking about leaders who have effectively transformed their organizations from pure product-focused strategies or service-focused strategies to true experiential service businesses. And the foundation of this presentation is that all business is personal. You know, the great Peter Drucker has been quoted as saying, we're not in business to create a profit. We are in business to create a customer. And truly, at the end of the day, our success, everyone's success, no matter the industry or the service, is in the ability to deliver a solution from one human being to another. As you get in larger organizations, the challenge is slightly greater in that it is being able to help people profit people through other people. So in essence, in order to run a large-scale organization, we need to be able to affect our people and have them profit other people, which ultimately will profit themselves in terms of their job stability and ourselves and any stakeholders in the organization. At the core of this discussion, I'm going to sound very American. And I know this can sound a little disarming, but increasingly we are finding, and Nobel Prize winners are winning prizes for economics of emotion. There is a clear foundational bit of research now that suggests that positive emotional connections between customers and brands are great differentiators between two brands who may be both operationally excellent, have terrific products. It is the brand that not only is top of mind with the consumer, but top of heart that wins the day. Now, saying that I think love is an important dimension of business sounds extremely foreign to most people. And as a psychologist by background, I understand that people could discount that. So I actually rely on an MIT professor who is well respected for very solid research and specifically focused on how to help your organization be a learning organization. And his name is Peter Hsieh. And Peter Hsieh wrote probably the definitive work on what it takes to help all organizations continue to grow and learn and be dynamic. And in the context of that work, he was able to determine that individuals seek to grow and be dynamic, and individuals seek to do business with companies that help them grow and be dynamic. And so at the end of the day, Peter Hsieh has suggested that really it is the business of love that is critical. And by love, he doesn't mean some kind of emotional, fluffy, non-substantive issue. He means a commitment, a genuine and authentic commitment to someone else's growth and development. So at the end of the day, I'm suggesting that businesses that learn how to love their people and their customers by committing to a very actionable item here, committing to the growth and the development of their people and their customers, are at a great advantage in the marketplace today. That commitment to growth and development, not just transactional success in the moment, but the long-term relational focus that builds great brands. Now, if you don't want to take the kind of conceptual statement of Peter Hsieh at face value, let's take a look at some data that suggests that this is also true. So, for example, in the United States, there was a great deal of angst not long ago when our economy started to show big signs of stress. And we saw consumers fleeing from higher-priced items. And there were many articles talking about commoditization and the importance of finding ways to lower price because price became value. And at that time, there was some support for that. There were people who were leaving higher-price options to go to lower-price options, and they weren't really all that concerned about quality or integrity of the brand or any of that. But the literature also showed something that was pretty important, which was as some were fleeing in difficult financial times, most, at least half, were still buying more expensive items. They were just doing some calculus. What was the experiences that they wanted to pay more for, and where could they forego some of the extra expense so that they had those resources for the experience that mattered most. And the point here is if I were emotionally connected to you, I was more likely to spend more money with you and not just get into a commoditization position. Beyond the notion that people would pay more for better experiences, even in the worst of times, there's clear evidence that the main reason people leave businesses, and this Accenture data happens to come from global studies, it seems to be relevant in all marketplaces globally, that people tend to leave businesses not because of product problems, not because of occasional service breakdowns, but because they genuinely get tired of feeling as though they do not matter. You may take care of me for the most part well, but if you don't care about me consistently well, I will leave your business. It's almost as if customers get a divorce from a business. They make the choice to no longer be in love with the business because of what they perceive as perpetual emotional neglect. That said, along with a study by Ogilvy in conjunction with IBM, demonstrated that if you could master that position in not only as the prime brand on the awareness list of your customers, but as the emotionally connected brand for your customers, you were substantially more likely to retain them on a factor of about 2.5%. Moreover, if you were able to build that loyalty around emotions, you were about 5 times, 4.5 times more likely to cross-sell to them. And we talk a lot about becoming trusted advisors to our customers, no matter what space we're in. If the customer will come to us and ask us or look at our website for suggestions or whatever it might be, if they'll come to us for guidance, we can sell them deeper into our portfolio of offerings. And clearly the data from Ogilvy says it's not just about operational or functional excellence, it's also about emotional connectivity. All right, so that all said, we know that companies that do execute both emotional and operational excellence tend to grow at a significantly greater rate than organizations that only master operational excellence. We know that those companies that do actually have customers come to them and give suggestions as to what is next or what is good or what is bad in the arena, those companies tend to have about a 20% increased sales volume. And we also know that those companies, as we saw in an earlier study, are more likely to retain customers, and that there's a monetizable benefit from retaining those customers. So clearly, for every 1% retention in an average business, you'll receive about a 5-fold benefit in terms of the increases of your profitability. If you lose those customers, if they churn, you're at risk on a factor of 5% for every 1% lost in an average business. You probably know those numbers readily as it relates to your business. But the point being, making the emotional connection, insuring yourself against churn, in enhancing the overall probability these people are going to be emotionally engaged and loyal is a significant value proposition. And ultimately, there is a status that some brands achieve, which we often call beloved brand status, that comes about as a result of having made a clear, oops, I think we just switched out to something, that makes a clear message that if I love you, I may get a status back as a beloved brand. So let's kind of take a quick look at this. Beloved brands really are the kinds of brands that people refer. They are not only loyal to them, but they make references. People go from being purely engaged and maintained customers to actually being advocates. And you know your brand is beloved. I like to say this about Starbucks. If someone sends a friend to Starbucks who has never been to a Starbucks coffee shop, and they send someone to a Starbucks, and the friend comes back and says, you know, I don't know why you liked it so much. I mean, I didn't like it. And the friend goes, are you kidding? I love Starbucks. I love this place. The reaction fairly quickly inside of the head of the person who made the referral is something on the order of saying, wow, I wonder what kind of friends I must be keeping, right? They don't question the brand, because their loyalty or their emotional relationship with the brand is actually stronger than their acquaintanceship with the person they sent. There's got to be something wrong with my friend. It couldn't possibly be the brand. All right, so all of this said, I'm talking about creating an emotional connection. And how do you do it? And what is it? And why do you do it? And how do you leave a legacy of having a brand that emotionally connects with your customers? So let's talk about it. First, you have to define it. You know, I've worked with the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company, and I've worked with a variety of other high-end hotels, and I've had good fortune of consulting with high-end auto manufacturers, and it's just been an amazing ride. I don't know how my career turned out as it did, but in the end of the day, most of these brands have spent a lot of time trying to figure out what they want their customers to feel. And once they define what it is they want customers to feel during the branded experience, then they can help their people understand, we want you to deliver this on our website. We want you to deliver this when they call the phone for the first time, when they log on and you're in a chat with them. We want you to deliver it when they walk into our brick and mortar stores. And we want you to deliver it at the front end of the experience and at the checkout time and at the call for sequel and all of the stages of the brand, and particularly the high value touch points. We want you to execute against it. So they define it. So let's take a look at how it's been defined by a few brands. The Ritz-Carlton has defined it as the desired way we serve is to create the home of a loving parent. You cannot charge people $700 US for a single room night unless you do something substantive beyond provide a room and a warm shower and a wake-up call. The reality is you have to do something that connects with them, that makes them feel as though this is worth more than a room, a warm shower, and a wake-up call, because you can get that in a commoditized way for a far lower price point. So what they try to deliver, while providing a very well-appointed room, and all of the other amenities that they provide, they try to deliver that product in a way that mothers would take care of a child. And that may sound kind of bad, but you know, you travel the world as I do, and you end up in some places and you don't know where you're going, and you just want to have that comfort of home. And not just comfort of home, because at home I actually have to wash my own, linens. I don't want that kind of comfort. You want the comfort of home that comes from somebody caring about you, to make sure you're safe, to make sure that someone really will know that things are being done for you and anticipating your needs and your wants and desires. So that's the foundational piece of the brand. And those who have stayed at a Ritz-Carlton or other high-end hotels and Meridians or whatever you might have in the world, you're going to find that most of those have taught their people it's not enough to just do the job. You have to wrap people into a nurtured emotional space. And in the case of the Ritz-Carlton, they define that as the home of a loving parent. At Starbucks, that end state definition is one of creating the third place. And by third place, they mean the place between work and home. Let's say home is your first place, work is your second place. For some people, that may be flipped around. The third place is Starbucks. That's what they want it to be, where you can come and have someone know you, where they can create affordable luxury for you to sit and have a conversation, where you are being invited into a living room of the community, not just your own personal living room or the communal area of a business world. So the job of a person in Starbucks, they're called partners because they get stock options at Starbucks, and so these partners are tasked to create the living room of the community and to allow people to have this third place experience. I've worked with Acura. Acura has spent time trying to figure out with their automobiles, how do they, in the dealerships, in the service departments, how do they want customers to feel? And they've recently created this concept called SUV, which is often short for sports utility vehicle in the automotive world. SUV in this context stands for treating clients as if they are special, understood, and valued. Employees in dealerships and all across the brand at corporate are being trained that the ultimate job of this is whatever you do, to make sure that when you do it, you say, you are an important person to me. Let me understand what you need. And at the end of it, let me say, thank you for taking the time to do business with me. Those three things are hallmarks of what they want to have people feel across the customer customer journey, and they've taken the time to define them. So my first question to you today really is something I hope you'll take back, because if I take the time to do the webinars, I hope people will jot something down that might trigger some action, right? So my hope would be that one thing you might do is ask yourself, do I have a defined emotional destination that I want my brand to deliver? And if you don't, I'm always around to help people do that. But moreover, if you don't, I think it's really pretty good time for you to begin some journey toward it. And what I would also say is, if you think you do, the best way to test it out is to go ask 10 people in your organization, how do we want people to feel? And if all 10 of them say the same thing, we want them to feel special, understood, and valued, then you've got a branded experience and they're trying to deliver against it. If, however, you get 7 answers, well, that tells you that people are improvising because you have not defined it. They're making it up. And there may be really good things they're trying to do, but they're getting 7 different brands every time they interact with you and your company. All right, once you have it, like the home of a loving parent, for example, at Ritz-Carlton, then you need to say, okay, how are we paying that off? Are we creating the home of a loving parent when people call us to make a reservation? Are we doing it when they arrive in their car? Are we doing it when we're sending people to their room? Are we doing it when they enter their room or when they leave the property? And if you're not, you have to build in ways to make it happen. So, for example, every year I go to New York City in the summertime, and I attend Broadway plays with my daughter. We take about a week to do that. I make the reservations in around January, and we normally go in the summer during her school break around June or July. When I make the reservation in January, they greet me as if they know me. They look at their database. After I say my name, they are quickly in their database, and they're able to look at my pattern, my preferences, my travel patterns, and typically I will call and I'll say, hi, this is Dr. Joseph Michelli, and I'm looking forward to coming out to New York this year. And before I can get much farther, they'll say, oh, great to hear that you're coming, Joseph. Or Dr. Michelli, we notice that you typically come with Fiona. Is that what's happening? Yeah, I'm coming with Fiona. That's great. That's wonderful. I mean, sometimes I go to my doctor, and my doctor doesn't even remember why he's seeing me, right? So here is a hotel company that has a knowledge, a relationship with me that they're able to call upon and not treat me like, who are you again? And so at that point I say, yeah, well, I go with Fiona, and they say, well, we noticed that you tend to stay at the Central Park Hotel, not the Battery Park Hotel in New York. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct. They do all the operational things right. They get my credit card correct. They make sure it's valid, all of that. And they have maybe a couple other moments with me, and I go on my merry way. Well, this last summer when I went there, I opened the door to my room, and as I opened the door to my room, the theme from the Lion King musical was playing. And my daughter looked at me and said, Dad, how did they know that we've never seen the Lion King and that we're seeing them this time? And I was totally confused, but I made it up, and I said, well, of course, Fiona, I take care of you. That's how they knew, but I really don't know. I suspect I must have said something in those few moments that let them know that I had gotten tickets to Lion King. I really can't remember saying that, but I must have, because they recorded it in the database. And not only did they record it, but then someone actually went out and got the music from the Lion King and put it on the stereo in my room. As we opened the door, it was playing. Now, if that isn't something your mother would have done, then what would she have done, right? Because a loving parent anticipates, a loving parent listens and delivers against even the unstated wants of a customer. All right, enough of that. I'm wanting just to point out that it has to be designed in once you define the destination, right? Once you know where you want to go and your people know what you want to go, then you need to be able to say, how are we doing at key touch points? So first we have defining the definition and building it into the touch points of the customer journey. The other piece of this is when an employee goes and gets the theme for the Lion King, and when I contact the hotel manager and say, wow, I don't know how you did that, but whoever did that, they deserve some serious credit. They deserve some amazing credit. Whenever I tell that to them, guess what happens at a Ritz-Carlton? They immediately bring that story back. They share that story very quickly. So my question to you is, first, have you defined it? Second question, if you have defined it, have you built in the desired destination emotionally along the journey? And third, have you shared stories of excellence when people are executing emotional connections with customers? Do you tell them? Do you tell them as quickly as you observe it? Do you link it back to your way we serve statement? Do you say, you know what, when this person brought the music of The Lion King in, and when Dr. Michelli and Fiona were so wowed by it, you were living our core values of delivering wow through service, and you executed against our way we serve statement. You treated them as a loving parent would have. Good job. And then if you're not doing that, how can you build it in? Because I'll tell you, at the Ritz-Carlton, every single day of the week, they are having a 20-minute meeting of all employees worldwide. And the 20 minutes isn't to talk about what is the new procedure or policy. The 20 minutes is to say, how are we doing at executing our emotional value proposition? Let's tell stories of how we're doing it well. Let's see opportunities of where we can do it better. Let's talk about our core values that commit us to creating customers for life. Let's talk about what we understand about those values and our responsibility to deliver behaviors that are consistent with those values and ultimately treat customers the way we have defined them to be treated, the way our brand treats customers. So those are just a few questions for you. Do you have the destination? Have you checked with your employees to make sure you do? Are they feeling it? Are you building that destination, that desired emotional connection into all the high-level touch points? When you catch people doing it right, are you sharing stories of that? Are you a storytelling culture of the great things that are happening in the customer emotional engagement? And then finally, are you finding ways to continue to be a storytelling culture? Because the ritual of storytelling and transferring experiences through story is powerful and connects with people at a different level than an operational manual ever could. I'm not saying you shouldn't have an ops manual. I'm just saying that in addition to operations, if you want people to understand relationship lessons, they come a lot through the oral tradition of storytelling. All right, so if you do all of that, my hunch is you will transform your business. You will not just be a great product provider, a smart business person, a savvy business executive, and someone who produces a good service organization. You will produce an organization that is world-class in creating experiences. And I think if you're committed to that, you should claim that legacy. You should say, it's not going to be good enough for me to do great work in terms of business profits. I want to leave something that lasts, bigger than just a pot of gold. So what is it that lasts? And why should we care? I mean, this sounds so American, I know, and it kind of ugly American, like, why should I care about my legacy? That is so, brash. And I think it can sound that way, but in the end of the day, we're all leaving a legacy, whether we intentionally design it or it happens by chance. After we're gone, there is going to be an awareness of whether we had impact or not. It is inevitable. The older I get, the more I care about this, right? The older I get, the more I think, was my life worth anything? I mean, I chased all kinds of great ideas and great, opportunities, but in the end of the day, did I accomplish anything beyond what my checking account says I did? And so I think it's an inevitable thing that we think about legacy as we get older. It may seem bold, but in truth, it's going to happen whether we plan it or not. And there is a new trend going on in leadership. There have been old school leadership theories about situational leadership or leadership traits. There's been a lot going on in leadership over the years. But in the last 10 years, I think, there's been a real move toward thinking about legacy, thinking about leadership from the end of our life backwards. So, in other words, if we took a Stephen Covey position, Stephen Covey and his son now has taken on this real big space in the leadership literature. And long ago, the older Covey, who's now deceased, wrote that we should start with the end in sight. We should begin with an awareness of where we want to end so that we can move our lives in the direction of that which we seek. John Maxwell, who has been kind enough to endorse my books, and a great leadership author in his own right, an amazing man, wrote, "People will summarize your life in one sentence. Pick it now." Wow. You know, of all that we do, it's kind of true. At the end of when we walk out of our building and they close our door for the last time and we've got our box of our personal items, or when we're no longer breathing, people are likely to say, you know, he was or she was a blank, you know, and it's pretty much over. He was a philanthropist. He was a man who transformed his industry. He not only was successful, but he also made a substantial difference. See, I think you can be a leader that is very successful and leave a very small footprint after you're gone. Very successful, but not much lasting impact. You can have success, but you can miss significance. So my point here really is, what significance do you want to have? Not just what success will you, because I believe great leaders can generate success. If not just for the short term, really great leaders can build success and help organizations, but can they really be significant? So there is a model out there that I love. It's by Brady and Woodward. It's a leadership revolution model, and it's one I think worth thinking about. If you want to have a legacy, you have to have influence. And as you note on the screen, influence is defined by effort times scope. So the notion is, the more effort you put out and the more people you have effect on, that is your level of influence. So if you really want to leave a legacy, you build your legacy over time. So when you first start on a job, the very first day on a job, you know nothing, right? You don't have much influence. No matter how much effort you put out, you don't have much scope either, because nobody lets you go out and do much because you don't know anything. So the only thing you have at the foundation is that you are hungry, you're eager to learn, you're honeable, meaning you're willing to change yourself, you're flexible, and you're honorable. You do what you say, right? So if you do what you say, you're willing to change, and you are eager, that's giving you some influence, because you're influencing others who are trying to learn alongside of you. Once you have learned something, then you are actually able to perform it. And as you perform your job, your influence is affected by how hard you work and by however many people you directly affect, your direct contact. As you become a leader, you not only affect through your own direct contact with people and your effort, but you also benefit by all of the people that you lead in terms of their effort and those they affect. That widens your scope. If you're a great leader, you help other leaders become greater. And if you help other leaders become greater, you not only have influence through all that you lead, but for all the people you develop and all the people they lead. And ultimately, the high end of this pyramid, according to Brady and Woodward, are people who say, you know what, I'm not only going to be a leader who puts a lot of effort out and tries to have a wide swath of people that follow me, but I'm also going to have everyone who follows me developing people to become leaders in their own right. And once you develop leaders that develop leaders, your impact is massive. You not only have your scope, but you have their scope and their scope's scope. And before you know it, you leave a very wide swath of influence in the world. So I spend my time working with great leaders. So the CEO of the UCLA Medical Center in Los Angeles, California, I wrote a book about them that became a New York Times #1 bestseller called Prescription for Excellence, and how to create transformational service cultures in healthcare in the United States. And Dr. David Feinberg said to me, because I ask all the leaders I work with what their legacy is going to be, and he said, you know, I want to lead a revolution that puts care back into healthcare. And he, in fact, has done that. He has transformed the healthcare delivery system at UCLA, not just the quality. They have always had great quality with solid organ transplants, for example, and much of your area of the world sends people for organ transplants to UCLA. The problem was they didn't always treat patients very well. They treated them from a medical standpoint very well, but from a human standpoint, it was kind of it was a demeaning experience at times. There were patients who would come up and say, I am alive, I should not be. It was almost miraculous. The problem is, I'm not sure it was worth what I went through to be alive, right? So when people are grateful that they're alive when they shouldn't be, but they're not even sure that they should be grateful because it was so miserable, you know you have to lead a revolution. And he's done so because he declared this legacy. And he led the organization around that legacy. All right, so let me go to the next one, which is Howard Schultz. Howard Schultz said that he wanted his legacy to be to build a lasting brand that elevates lives one cup at a time. Now let's talk about this for a second. Leave a lasting brand. I mean, Howard Schultz has built a powerful brand, But it started to have some problems after he left the helm as CEO and went to the job of global strategist. Howard had to literally go back in, because this was his legacy, right, that he would leave a lasting brand. He had to go back in as a CEO and do a turnaround on a company, which is very difficult for a startup entrepreneur to go back later and turn around his own business. But it was his legacy, he committed to it, and he's created a transformational opportunity for jobs around the world. Simon Kuper, the recent CEO of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company, said, my legacy is to not screw it up. I've taken a brand of great equity. I don't want to just make random changes. I want to have the discipline to only make changes that push people to see how good can be and to achieve sustainable excellence. And so he resisted doing lots of change and focused more on inspirational opportunities for the brand. Tony Hsieh is the CEO of a company I wrote about in a book called Zappos, The Zappos Experience. Zappos is an online company. It predominantly sells shoes online. It was recently purchased by Amazon for over $1 billion. In this brand, he sold predominantly shoes. Prior to that, he sold software. When asked what he wanted his legacy to be, he said, you know, I used to think it was about money. I thought it was about achieving incredible wealth and success, and as a billionaire, he's done that. I used to think it was about software. I had success in software. I used to think it was about shoes. He said, I had success in shoes. But you know, now I think it's about delivering happiness. I think at the end of the day, the thing I want to be known for, that one sentence that John Maxwell talked about, is he's a man who not only achieved wealth, not only did things with money and software and shoes, but ultimately he was a man who helped deliver happiness at work and happiness to consumers through the products that he offered. Johnny Yokoyama, who owns a little fish stand in Seattle, Washington, where they throw fish, and he's created a company that's pretty dynamic. Many books have been written about it. Fish is a classic book written about it. There have been videos about his company, and I wrote a book with him called When Fish Fly. Johnny said, I want to make a difference, and I want to teach the world that they have a power to make a similar difference. Johnny started his life in poverty, was actually interned in a Japanese-American internment camp when the United States government took Japanese Americans and put them in concentration-type camps, actually called internment camps, surrounded by barbed wire and living in tar paper huts. Right after World War II, when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, Japanese Americans were relocated to these segregated camps. Johnny started his life there. It was war-torn. He wanted to be a peacemaker. He wanted to help people realize that if he could come from that poverty and that background and have the kind of success that he had, that anyone could do that, that they have power to make a difference in the world, whether it's financial power or interpersonal power. And that became his mantra, and it's really the way his organization runs, and it's a large reason for why they are as successful as they are today. All right, well, at the end of all that, the clear message is you have to be willing to define your legacy, and particularly as it relates to service and delivering memorable experiences. You have to think about what wisdom or intellectual knowledge do you have on board that you would have to transfer to the next generation so that it doesn't die with you. And then finally, you have to be a mentor. You have to be willing to take people under your wing as proteges and help develop them to have a lasting impact beyond the time that you're in an organization. So I ask you, what is your legacy? What legacy would you like to leave, particularly as it relates to defining a service experience, building the service experience into key touch points, making sure that you're talking about the successes of service in your organization? And you might say, well, yeah, I'll get around to that. I got a lot of other things. You know, it's late in the evening. I really don't want to think about that tonight. I want maybe tomorrow, maybe next month. Really, it's not a high priority. And maybe that's true. But I can tell you that in the picture you see on the left, there's a picture of my wife and my 2 children. And if it were up to me, I would not have any kids probably, because back in the day I was not all that interested in leaving a legacy through my children. I was just kind of thinking about, in my youth, you know, when could I go out on my next date with my then girlfriend, soon-to-be wife. But she kind of insisted that if I was ever going to marry her, I would have to think about having a legacy of kids who could make a difference in the world. And that seemed way too much for me to think about at the time, but sooner or later she wore me down, and I said, yes, I would really like to have a legacy of raising kids that are functional and do good in the world. So we entered into our journey toward that legacy. Of course, we had plenty of time, right? Not really. A couple of months ago, my wife died. She was 51 years of age. Had she not insisted on it long ago, she would not have had her children there with her at the point of death. My son came back after having graduated from college, and having started his own career. He took a year off of his career early on to come back and be with her for the final year of her life, and was there at her bedside, as was my daughter, in the last breath she took a couple of months ago. My point for you really is, let's not put it off. Let's make a genuine commitment to legacy today. Let's do what it takes to move the needle around these questions. Are you willing to define the desired brand experience? Are you willing to design that desired brand experience into the customer journey? Are you willing to reinforce that desired brand experience and behavior needed to get there through active, positive storytelling? If you do, will you create and share your leadership legacy with people you trust? And ultimately, will you do something different tomorrow? Thank you so much for your time and attention. It's now time to take some questions, and hopefully I'll have some answers. Again, thank you for being a part of the webinar.
Okay, thank you very much, Michelli. Quite an inspiring presentation. Folks, now we are open for Q&A. If you have questions, you could either raise your hand or you could put your questions in the chat box, and I'll be happy to read them over. I see there are already a few questions in the chat box, which I can start reading. Meanwhile, feel free to raise your hand. Let me, sure. There's one interesting question. Storytelling. How do you manage bad stories, or how should we manage the damage control done?
I think within the culture, I think it's important to say, we don't always get it right, and it's not an issue of people, punishing people who get it wrong. It's an issue of learning from those situations. Now, if somebody willfully mistreats a guest, if there's chronic patterns, that's a whole other issue. But I think if you're really going to be constructive about building a culture, you have to say it's not where we end, it's where we start, right? So we're starting at a place where we have a few problems, where we're making some mistakes, where we have breakdowns. We want people to be able to come forward and talk about the service breakdowns, not only the customers, but peers be able to share that, and employees come up and say, I think I handled this wrong. It would be an ideal world if everybody could just come to someone and say, how do I handle this better? So I think the first effort is trying not to create a culture of blame within the organization, to be able to say, we will take those things, we'll problem solve, we'll figure out ways to make improvements, and unless you intentionally do something wrong to a customer, we're going to give you some freedom to share that with us. So first and foremost, I think it is trying to create an environment where there isn't a lot of guilt or blame, but there is a solution focused to any type of breakdown. Once you hear from a customer about the breakdown, it's critically important to say to the customer, to the degree you can legally, and I think it's always important, you can't take responsibility. Something's going to end you in a lawsuit. For the most part, rather than getting too wound up around the damage control of, oh my gosh, we're going to get sued, I think most of the time you say, I am sorry, that should not have happened to you. What can we do to fix this? What do you need to be made whole? And for a while, it's often just listening to them rant. And after they ranted for a while and they calm down, and you continue to say, now let's talk about how we can help you move past this. What do you need for us to make this right? And often you can negotiate that. There's always a certain percentage of people that are completely unreasonable. But beyond that small percentage, most of the time people just often, if I go into a restaurant, for example, and it's wrong, I don't necessarily want them to immediately offer to buy my meal. I mean, I came in with money. I didn't expect them to buy my meal. I didn't complain to get a free meal. What I did expect for them to say, well, what could we do to make this right for you? And I might say, please send it back in. Can you prepare it differently? Or I might say, maybe you can throw in a dessert. I don't know. I'm okay with it. I don't need anything. I'm just glad you listened. So I think it's a lot about learning how to listen for what the customer solution is, and if it isn't something you can do to negotiate to what you can do, and then once you're done with it, to make sure that you're very clear you will fix whatever the process is that caused the breakdown, and hopefully with that person you will not ever have that same breakdown again, because people will forgive you mistakes. I mean, all of us are human. We know we make mistakes. Many of us run businesses. We know our businesses aren't perfect, and we give that same mindset to others. We just want to know that our inconvenience mattered. There was some effort to remedy it, not a grandiose one, but a reasonable one. And we want to know that you're committed to doing what it takes to not have that breakdown happen again, and that you respectfully acknowledge that we suffered in some way in your organization. You don't want it to happen again. We mattered.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move to Brother Mahmoud Jabir, who has raised his hand. Brother Mahmoud Jabir, can you hear us? Could you please introduce yourself and where you're calling from, and please ask a question? Mr. Brother Mahmoud Jabir, can you hear us? You raise your hand. Okay, I see you have posted the question in the chat box also. Okay, the question is, way to start building the legacy culture so that our team believes in us.
Wow, what a great question. I mean, the fundamental, there's some great research out now that says that the level of organizational trust in a leader not only predicts the success of the leader, but the actual market value of the organization. That's pretty crazy, right? I mean, the stock value of an organization is linked. High leadership trust increased market value of an organization on an order of about 3 times the organizations led in a low leadership trust thing. So, wow, what a great question. Let me start with this basic premise that trust operates from a foundation of saying, do you do what you say? Is your behavior consistent with your actions? It comes from the word integrity, which means integer or whole. Are you whole in action and word? Next level up is intention. Is your intention to just become a really famous leader and leave the rest of your team behind? Are your self-ambitions so great that you will sacrifice team members in order to achieve your objectives? So is your intention the greater good of all, the good of the organization, making tough decisions sometimes, but ultimately they can see as you make difficult decisions, it's in the interest of the organization, not just a personal self-serving interest. Maybe it's a mutual interest that people understand that you have to profit yourself as you move an organization forward, but you're not willing to sacrifice someone else for your best interest. The next thing they want to know is, do you have the capability and competence to do what's necessary to move the organization where it needs to go? So capabilities are the next level up. The level above that in terms of overall trust assessment is whether or not you have delivered the goods in the past, you're delivering the goods today, and you're likely to deliver the goods tomorrow. So it starts with integrity, it goes to intention, it moves up to whether or not you're competent from a capabilities perspective, and the final frontier is whether or not you've demonstrated results. What I think lots of leaders do is they talk a lot about results and they forget about the intention. They forget about talking about, look, we have to profit from this. You know, while it might be in my interest personally to move in this direction, I think our greater good is reflected in these moves. It comes from people saying, wow, you know, he says we are really committed to service, but look, we're spending no money on service, or we have a service initiative that's time limited when he claims to want to leave a legacy about service. He wants to leave a legacy about service. He should be talking about service consistently, and it should not just be something we phase in good times or phase in times of desperation. So I think it starts with looking at yourself in a mirror. I think a mirror is a very powerful tool for leaders. Unfortunately, often leaders have distorted mirrors, like the kind you see at a carnival or something, that makes them look thinner and taller and smarter than they really are. We have to look at our warts. We have to look at the ways in which we're not consistent. And if we do, people will trust us. They'll trust.
Dr. Joseph Michelli, can you hear us?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, yeah, I think we lost you for just a few seconds. My apologies for this inconvenience, folks. Yes, Doctor, could you continue from where you left? Perhaps we lost you for the last 15 seconds.
I think all I said is that if you really do generate trust, you know, I assume you heard me say that the stages of trust are really first to have integrity, to do what you say. The next step is to make sure that you are doing things in a mutual context. The next step up is to demonstrate your competence, and the final step up is to demonstrate your results, past, present, and future. If you do those things as it relates to looking in a mirror, seeing yourself for what you truly are you genuinely moving in the intention of the overall organization, not your own, if you are doing what you say as it relates to service experiences, and if you are demonstrating that you have the knowledge of what it takes by going to webinars like those provided by Mile, I think at the end of the day, you move organizations and you make them more profitable.
Okay, great. I see there's a number of questions in the chat box. And folks, if you could raise your hand, I can give you an opportunity to speak to him so we can make it more interactive. However, let me go and pick a few of the interesting ones. We have from Brother Mahmoud Sharaf, who asked, who can put the legacy? Is it the CEO or each department head will put for his own department?
Oh, I think we all have a personal legacy that we create, right? I mean, I think that the gardener, the person who trims the bushes outside of your building has a legacy. Whether or not he takes full advantage of it or she takes full advantage of living that legacy, some people will leave a legacy of having done an okay job. Some will have earned their pay. Some will have had a passion for it and been creative and done it well, but some will lead other people, inspire humans, create an environment. We all have a legacy, and I think if we declare it, and we'll move up in the organization, and one day our legacy may very well be a CEO, but if you don't run a department, you can have transformational impact on that department. You can have transformational impact on developing leaders beneath you to take over your department someday, who can say when they're running the department, you know why I'm running this department? It's because so-and-so was my mentor and really helped me know how to do this. And who knows, they may become the CEO someday. So I don't think we always know. Sometimes the students become bigger than the teachers in the end, but our legacy is through our students then, even to a greater degree than in our own service delivery, our own department.
Another question from Brother Ahmed Al-Jazairi. How do you align your legacy with others who work with or for you who could have totally different ideas on this matter?
Oh, again, what wonderful questions. I mean, I think at some point if you just start asking people about what impact do they want to have, if you're in a position to select an organization, create an organization around yourself, I think it is good to have people of like-minded passion for legacy. I don't think everybody should be like us around everything, or I think they should have similar core values, but lots of different life experiences. That said, I think if you are in an organization where there are people with various different legacies, I think it's important to have conversations about that. Because sometimes what you'll find is that you have synergies where if your legacy would fit very nicely with someone else's, and there might be some disconnects. There might be some people who want to, have their legacy is to be the most powerful, competitive, successful player, and your legacy is to be the most affiliative, communal, build an organization that is a kind of a seamless organization. They want to have a win-lose organization. I think sometimes you have to say, okay, we're going to have to stay a little away from each other. Our objectives are not going to mesh. But there might be a few places where they will mesh, where in order for them to win, they may need to cooperate. And you can build those kind of selective connections. But I think it's important. I want to know what people's agenda is when I deal with them. And often people are so not aware that they'll tell you one agenda and they really are practicing another. Sometimes they're aware and they're just deceitful. I mean, that happens. But I like being transparent. I like saying, you know what, here's my legacy. I'll tell you right now. I serve people who serve well. Okay, I am committed to serving people who are committed to serving well. So let me say that you and I got together and you told me your legacy is to serve well, and it turns out I come in your organization, I start consulting with you, and all of a sudden I find out you really don't care. You're just trying to act that way so that your people will be more motivated, but in truth you could care less. Well, at that point I just say, I'm sorry, I'm not going to work with you. I'll go find someone else who's more aligned with what I do, and I will work for them. And guess what? When I work for them, we will have much better results than if I tried to work for you, and you will stifle my efforts because my legacy is not what you wish to have happen. So, in some cases, you just get to a point where you have an impasse and you say, maybe this organization isn't suited for me because it's moving in a different direction than how I want my life to ultimately end. So anyway, in some cases you have to leave, some cases you can negotiate, some cases you can agree to disagree, but many times just having the conversation helps you find partners that can help you achieve more than what you would have done had you never discussed it.
Okay, another interesting question. While observing people's personal moments and record it, how important is that you do not jump over the privacy? What procedural measures needs to be taken to ensure, at a policy level, to ensure that privacy of individuals are not compromised by our staff?
Well, this line between personal and private is becoming increasingly challenging. We live in times where almost all of our personal actions are being observed and tracked on the grid, and everywhere I walk in the United States, there's a surveillance camera probably, getting an image of me, and in my workplace, there's certainly all kinds of things that could be tracking me. I think at the end of the day is that people assume, I think people should assume everything they do is public. I think that's a healthy thing to assume. And at the same time, I think that there are behaviors that are not in the interest of the business, and I think a lot of it is opt-in. If you use our online network, you realize if you go on to sites, outside of what is the business channels, we're tracking that. If you choose to do that, just know that. I think the problem is when I'm using it and I don't know that you're monitoring me, then then I feel like you violated my privacy. But if you allow me to opt in, and if I then do something that's inappropriate, then I have assumed the risk, right? I think it's a lot about opting in. And we do that same thing with consumers a lot. We have software at Zappos, for example, where if you go into you're on a website, and you're on the Zappos website, you're looking at a pair of shoes, a couple of days later, you're on some other website, and those shoes start popping up on those websites, the same shoes. It's like those shoes you meant to buy or you looked at or you showed an interest in, they're kind of following you around for a few days on your web journey. It's creepy, right? But there is an opt-in option that happens that causes that to happen. Sometimes it's a little too veiled, and people don't even realize they've opted in. So that can be a problem. But I do think if you go in the employee manual, if you make a point of talking about this is the way we tend to watch for activities that are not helpful for our organization, just be aware that if you choose to engage in these activities, just know that this kind of monitoring is going on, and it's for the greater good of our organization to protect against theft and churn, and give some rationale for the context of paying attention and holding people accountable. But then don't surprise them with, oh, and we had a bathroom cam in there and we saw what you were doing in front of the mirror. I think that's where people cross the creepy line.
Okay. All right, Brother Jabber has requested to unmute him. I believe his microphone is resolved. Brother Mahmoud Jabber, could you introduce yourself? You can hear us, and please ask the question. I've just unmuted you. Mahmoud Jabber, based on your request, I've unmuted your microphone, sir. Okay, I guess we can't. Okay, Brother Jabber, can you hear me? Hello? I guess we are still okay. I think he has put a supplementary question on the chat box. How can you start to identify the key touch points when one has a big volume of customers day in out?
Well, I think there is an empirical way to do it, but if you have large volumes of customers, you probably know, at least intuitively, a place to start. I think most of us, the first impression matters a lot, right? So are you making a first impression, whether that's through their first click through to your site? Is that first impression saying what you want to say about your brand? Does it really genuinely say, thank you for taking the time to be with us? Or is it one of, let's get to the buy, here's the product? If you want to say we're easy or efficient, that's your value proposition. We want to create an experience where people feel so at ease, it's effortless. Then is it really effortless, or is that first contact cumbersome? So I think that's the important thing. The other way to do it is take some of your high-value customers, get them on your advisory committee, people who are using your products a lot in your high-volume business, the people you're making a bulk of money off of, and sit down with them one way or another and get some qualitative data to say, how was our greeting process? How was your arrival process? What were things that made you feel welcome or unwelcome when you arrived, particularly if welcomeness is your key? So, yeah, I think sometimes it is very difficult when you're in a high-demand business. And actually, because you're in a high-demand business, you may conclude, hey, I don't really need to do any of this because look at my demand. And I would say that would be the biggest error of all, because often culture and experience is the success of your business is a lagging indicator of whether or not those things have died already. So you may have some profit for a while, even after customers are not enjoying the experience anymore. And certainly a competitor could come in, match your experience, and you're at risk with a coupon. So you need to constantly be tracking what will keep my customers loyal.
Okay, another one. When you have an emotional attachment as a customer to a brand, and if the brand fails, it breaks your trust. How does a brand win back the trust of such a customer?
Boy, I think by humbly saying we screwed up. And we should have never done this. And to anyone like you, of all people, we will make this right. It's not your fault. As soon as a brand does that, it's so different than most companies. It's like, I knew they were lovable in the first place. Look at them. They're remarkable. They're not like the other brand I just dealt with that I didn't love that treated me so poorly. And when you do that, actually, there is a slight amount of empirical literature to suggest that they'll like you more. And that's been overdone, right? There's been a bunch of people who say that if you make a mistake and you fix it, people will like you more than if you hadn't made a mistake. My belief is don't make the mistake, but if you did and you massively handle the service recovery with incredible grace, there is a statistical probability they will like you more because you actually handled it well. But don't go out of your way to make a mistake just so you can show how good you are at handling it.
Okay, as we are nearing the 60 minutes, we can just take one last question. You mentioned the saying of Peters and Gay, about love. Love is a verb. That means a lot of actions are required. Could you summarize and recommend any preferred business actions or bullets that could gain that trust of love and eventual commitment?
So Paul Tillich, a philosopher, once said the first act of love is to listen, right? And clearly, whoever said love is a verb, blessings to you, because that's exactly right, and it's not an end state. So the first act is to listen. And if I had one action, it would be to spend more time listening to my people and listening to my customers, and then thinking about ways that I can economically deliver against what I hear. And if that's what I do all the time, I will have a much greater probability of being in love with my customers and my customers being in love with me than I will if I just keep guessing or trying to be such a smart leader that I am figuring it out on my own in my closed-door boardroom. I think love is about listening first and foremost. And if you do that and you try to steward your organization to deliver against what you hear, and you envision a future of whatever you're hearing and try to anticipate that and position your business against the future, that's what great leaders do. So thank you for that question. Thank you for the entire hour. It was absolutely fabulous. I hope we can spend time together again somehow in the future.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Joseph Michelli. It's been quite an interesting and very overwhelming last 1 hour or 60 minutes. We could easily read and experience the passion presentation that you have delivered. And I would like to personally thank you on behalf of Smile for your time and for sharing this valuable information with us. Any other concluding remarks you would like to give before we close?
No, it's a pleasure. I've spent time in Saudi Arabia. I've spent time in the United Arab Emirates in various locations, and I really love your part of the world, and I love the leadership that I see demonstrated there. So the word love is said in a very important way, and I'm in great gratitude for the things I've learned from your part of the world and hope that we can cross-share into the future.
Well, thank you very much. We certainly look forward to having you again on our series of webinars, or in fact, we would like to perhaps one day invite you to the Kingdom again. And thank you once again, and thank you all of those who participated in this webinar. Please be informed that we are recording this webinar, which we will be uploading on our YouTube channel and on the Mile community in a couple of days. And even the soft copy will be available for you to download, so please stay tuned. And once again, thank you all. I will be closing this